Hi guys, welcome back to Craig's channel. No, you have not clicked on the wrong channel, and no, you have not entered the Twilight Zone, I promise. My name is Shannon and I also have a channel where I upload true crime content every week. And Craig and I have decided to do a collab, and given the way of the world right now, we thought that taking over each other's channels for 1 week would be a really fun way to do it. And so here I am with you guys. And the lovely Craig is over on my channel right now, so when you're finished watching this one, make sure you go over and check that out. Craig will have it linked in the description box somewhere. So today I'm going to be telling you about the infamous killers John Shaw and Geoffrey Evans. It's a dark one, but it's a big case here in Ireland. Although they are not technically the definition of the word serial killers, these men are quite commonly referred to as the first serial killers in Ireland. John and Geoffrey went on the run from the UK in the 80s with the intention of coming to Ireland and killing one woman a week. And there's a lot to get into, so let's get straight into it. Oh, and before I go, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That'll tell you every time Craig uploads a video, so you can come straight here and watch it. You don't want to miss them. Okay, let's go. So today I'm going to be telling you about Ireland's first serial killers, John Shaw and Geoffrey Evans. So there's not a lot of information about John Shaw and Geoffrey Evans' early lives, but what we do know is that they moved to Ireland from England. And both men would have been born in the early 1940s. Both men were from the Lancashire areas and they were both heavily involved in criminal activity throughout their lives. John Shaw had amassed 26 convictions while he was living in the UK, and these ranged all the way from arson and theft all the way up to sexual assault. And likewise, Geoffrey had ranked up 36 convictions, all similar. Now, the two men had met while they were in prison, and they decided that when they would get out, they would team up and commit even more crimes. They got on quite well and they thought that they were a good match. John was quite a large man. He was built very big, he was strong, he had worked as a miner for a long period in his life. Whereas Geoffrey was very intelligent and cunning. He was kind of the brains behind the operation. And despite being the physically smaller one of the two, he was known to be quite the dominant one in orchestrating their crimes. So when they were released from prison, the two men, who were now in their 30s, followed through with their word and they set up their little crime duo. And quickly they became wanted by the UK police for 3 very brutal and violent sexual assaults in the Manchester area, and one of which was the 16-year-old daughter of a policeman. And it was with that the two men decided to go on the run to Ireland. They arrived in Ireland in 1974, and for whatever reason on arrival they made a pact with each other that they would plan to go all around Ireland and rape, abduct and murder one woman a week. Or as they so eloquently put it, one bird a week. Now, to start off with, fortunately they did not get too far with this plan, because on arrival in Ireland the men had no money and no transport. And so they decided to carry out a series of burglaries in County Wicklow, and very quickly they were caught by Gardaí, which is the Irish police, and charged. They both spent 18 months in Mountjoy prison and they were released in 1976, decided to team up again and give their plan that I had mentioned earlier another go. So all of this leads us up to the night of the 28th of August 1976. It was a Saturday night and Elizabeth Plunkett, who was 23 years old at the time, was heading away with 5 of her friends for the weekend. Elizabeth worked full-time as a foreign currency clerk in Dublin, which is where she also lived. And she had been having a brilliant summer. She was actually not long home from a holiday to Saint-Tropez in France with her best friend. And on this weekend in August, Elizabeth, along with her boyfriend and 4 other friends, decided to make use of their friend's caravan. And the caravan was in Brida's Bay, which is a very popular seaside destination in Wicklow. So it was only about an hour's drive from Dublin, and the group were really excited. When they arrived in Wicklow, they went straight to McDaniel's pub. And McDaniel's was an extremely popular pub, especially in the summertime when it would be packed with tourists. Wicklow and Brida's Bay is quite a tourist trap, so the pub was really full. It was a Saturday night, but the group managed to find seats and they settled in to have a few drinks. And then a fight kind of broke out between Elizabeth's boyfriend Damien Bush and another one of their friends. Elizabeth told the two men to cut it out or that she was going to leave and go home, but they didn't, and Elizabeth ended up following through with this threat and she left the pub. So she began walking down the road and she was spotted by quite a few people getting into a car with a man, and this man just so happened to be Geoffrey Evans. Geoffrey had pulled up alongside her when she was walking and asked her where she was headed. Elizabeth replied that she was headed to Dublin, and Geoffrey told her that he could give her a lift. And I know nowadays that you don't just hop in the car with a stranger, but this was Ireland in the 1970s and it was a very common thing to just get a lift with someone, and Elizabeth probably thought nothing of it other than she was thankful for the lift on this really rainy night. I'm sorry if you can hear the rain in the background. This is Ireland and it's very heavy rain today. I apologise. However, once Elizabeth was in the car, Geoffrey drove her down a back road where they picked up John Shaw, who was standing on the side of the road. And as I'm sure you can imagine, once they had picked up this man standing on the side of the road, Elizabeth knew that something was very wrong here, and so she started screaming and trying to escape from the car. But the two men began brutally attacking her in the car, and they ended up stuffing tissue in her mouth to stop her screaming. They drove Elizabeth to Castleton Wood, which is where she would end up being brutally raped and murdered by the two men, but I will go further into her death later on. So now, in the meantime, Damien Bush, who if you remember was Elizabeth's boyfriend, began looking for Elizabeth along with her group of friends, and when they couldn't find her, Damien hopped in the car and made the drive back to Dublin to see if she had gone home. But her parents had not seen or heard from her, and so in the early hours of Sunday the 29th of August, Elizabeth was reported missing to the Gardaí. So a search began immediately, and the witnesses who I had mentioned earlier came forward with any information that they had that they saw Elizabeth getting into the car with this man. Of course, this really wasn't too much to go off, and nobody had managed to get the number plate as far as I could find. But a few days into the search, a lady's sandal and a watch were found in the Castleton Woods, and both were confirmed to be belonging to Elizabeth. Also found nearby were a size 6 pair of black boots with steel tips and brass screws on the heel, and also a label on them with the name Geoffrey Murphy written on it. Now, on Monday the 30th of August, a Garda in Wicklow had come across two men standing on the side of the road in front of a fire they had lit. And the Garda asked the men their names, and they obviously gave two fake names, one of which was Geoffrey Murphy. He noted that the men had English accents, and so he asked them, "Where are you guys staying?" And they replied that they were staying with their friend Chris Outram in the town of Feathered in Tipperary. Now, the Garda just said that he got bad vibes off the two men. They obviously hadn't really done anything wrong, they were just standing at the side of the road. But he just felt in his gut that something was off, and so he decided to write down all the information, including the car's number plates. Now, at the time, the Garda in question was not aware that there was a young woman missing in the area, but as soon as he heard this, he relayed the information about these two strange men that he had come across back to his Gardaí station. And given that the Geoffrey Murphy label found in the woods near Elizabeth's items matched up to the name given to the Garda, the search was now well and truly underway for a man named Geoffrey Murphy. While the search for Elizabeth was ongoing, a description of the two men had been given to all the newspapers, and so John and Geoffrey knew that they had to get out of Wicklow. They were not actually lying about having this Chris Outram friend in Tipperary, and so they headed down to him. The car they had abducted Elizabeth in actually belonged to him, and they were returning it. They had borrowed it. The two men asked Chris for a lift, and they ended up making their way to Galway, which is the complete opposite end of the country. It's about 3 hours drive from Wicklow. And when they arrived in Galway, they bought a mobile home, stole a green Ford Cortina, painted it black, and did a very bad, dodgy DIY job on it, by the way. Then they were on the move again, and they headed to the town of Castlebar, which is about 25 minutes drive from me, so it's quite close to home. So we fast forward now to the night of the 10th of September that same year. We're still in Castlebar, where a woman named Mary Duffy was finishing up her shift as a waitress at about 11:30 in the evening. Mary, who was 24 at the time, used a payphone to try and contact her brother at work to see if he could give her a lift home, but he was out and he couldn't pick her up, and so she decided to start walking home. It was a 5-mile walk and she had walked it many nights before. But what Mary did not know was that on this particular night, Geoffrey Evans and John Shaw had been watching her, and when she set off walking, they pulled up beside her in the car and offered her a lift, just like they did to Elizabeth Plunkett. And Mary, again probably grateful of the lift home and thinking nothing of it, accepted the lift and hopped in the car. Mary did not return home that night, and when she was reported missing the following day, and also because things like this didn't really happen in Ireland at the time, Gardaí began to speculate that these two disappearances were linked. And their suspicions were confirmed when they received information from a local shopkeeper in Castlebar. He told Gardaí that 2 Englishmen gave their description had come into the shop to get petrol for their car. And what made him notice them was the car. It was the stolen Ford Cortina that I mentioned earlier, and the shopkeeper thought it was odd that it was very clearly hand painted, and quite poorly at that, and he actually thought it was so suspicious that he decided to write down the number plate. And this was a huge help to the Gardaí. Along with the description of the men that he gave, they now knew that it was in fact the same 2 men that they were looking for. And the pressure was on. They knew that they needed to catch these 2 men ASAP before another disappearance was reported. So next of all, the Gardaí decided to pay a visit to Chris Outram, who was the friend. And Chris told the Gardaí that yes, the 2 men had been staying with him, but he had driven them to the train station on the 10th of September, and that was the last he had seen of them. He also gave Gardaí the men's real names, and he confirmed that the boots with the screws in them belonged to Geoffrey. From what I could find, Chris was actually the one who repaired these boots for Geoffrey, so he knew for certain that they belonged to him. So now Gardaí had the true identity of the men. They knew the number plates of the car they were driving, a very good description of the men, and exactly the type of car they would be driving. And so this information was relayed to all the Garda stations across Ireland. And just a short while later, on the 29th of September, which was the day of the All-Ireland football final, and so that means that all the towns in Ireland would have been full of people in the pub watching the game, Garda Jim Boland was on duty, and he was just driving around the town when he noticed the hand-painted Ford Cortina. He had a look and he saw 2 men sat in it, and he knew straight away that these were the 2 men suspected of the disappearances of Elizabeth Plunkett and Mary Duffy. So Jim rang his Garda station and told them that he needed backup ASAP, and that he thought they had the 2 men in his sights. They were parked outside a hotel where there was a nightclub on that night, and one can only assume that they were probably looking for their next victim. And John and Geoffrey kind of noticed that there was a Garda car parked by them, and Jim saw that they were making shapes to leave, and so he did what he could and he parked his Garda car in such a way that Geoffrey and John could not drive away without Garda Jim Boland moving. And he sat there and waited, parked up just like that, blocking the 2 men until the backup Gardaí arrived. And Jim said to the other Gardaí, "I'll get the guy in the driver's seat, you get the one in the passenger seat." And so they moved to the car. There was a bit of a struggle, but eventually they arrested John and Geoffrey on suspicion of possession of a stolen vehicle. They were brought into custody, and as you can probably imagine, the 2 men gave fake names. And so the Gardaí began a series of interviews, and they eventually managed to get the 2 men's real names out of them. The next task now was to try and get information about Elizabeth and Mary. And at this time, searches were still ongoing for the 2 women, and everyone really hoped that they would get this information out of the 2 men and that they would perhaps turn up safe. But unfortunately, that was not the case, and eventually it was John Shaw who actually ended up confessing to everything. John went into detail with the Gardaí and told them everything about the horrific crimes they had committed and exactly what they had done to these 2 young women. Elizabeth, once they had brought her to the woods, was tied up and raped and beaten repeatedly by both men. According to John, Geoffrey then gave him directions to choke her with the sleeve of his shirt. And John did just that, and while he was doing so, Geoffrey decided to have a little walk around the woods for himself, and when he came back, he weighed Elizabeth's body down and threw her into the sea. Mary, who they had brought to an abandoned railway station once she was in the car, met quite a similar fate. But poor Mary was tied to a tree for nearly 48 hours, where the men would take turns to rape and beat her, and eventually she was killed by suffocation. The men then tied a cement block to Mary's ankle and threw her in the nearby lake. And while John was confessing to all of this, he told Gardaí that the reason he was confessing, and I quote, was an attack of Catholic guilt, which is kind of ironic because it's not very Catholic of him to go around murdering these young women. And he told the Gardaí during the questioning, and I quote, "God help me, it was the devil that made me do it. Keep him away from me." And I'm not quite sure if he was talking about the actual devil or referring to Geoffrey Evans as the devil, because John very quickly started to blame everything on Geoffrey. He said that he had wanted to let Mary Duffy and Elizabeth Plunkett go, but Geoffrey would not let him. He also said that he was glad the Gardaí had caught him because himself and Geoffrey had intended to murder one Irish woman a week. And in February 1978, John Shaw was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murders of Elizabeth and Mary, as well as 14 years for rape and a further 2 years for false imprisonment. 10 months later, Geoffrey Evans was also given a life sentence for the same crime, as well as being jailed for 20 years for the rape of both women. Geoffrey Evans underwent heart surgery in 2008, and due to complications he fell into a coma, which he remained in for 4 years before dying in May 2012, aged 69. John Shaw is 73 years old and is currently still in prison serving out his life sentence. He is actually the longest serving prisoner in Ireland. So guys, that is all I have for you today. What did you think of this case? It's a pretty heavy one, but I also think it's a really interesting one. Because first of all, I have no idea how these two men got away with so much. Even before they came to Ireland. I mean, surely a combined 62 convictions was enough to make the authorities think probably should do something about these guys. And just the fact that these two men teamed up with each other, and they really did have a goal to become serial killers, and the fact that they found in each other what the other one was missing, as in like John was the strength and Geoffrey was the brains of the operation. It's just mad. It is so sad that Mary and Elizabeth had their young lives cut so short. They were both beautiful, smart young women with their whole lives ahead of them, and the only real saving grace in this case is that John and Geoffrey were caught when they were, because who knows how many more women I would be sitting here telling you about today. Do leave a comment below with your thoughts because I would love to hear them. And if you did enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. And now I just want to say a massive thank you to you guys, Craig's lovely subscribers. Thank you for letting me take over this channel today and listen to the case that I had for you. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you are not subscribed already to Craig's channel, what are you waiting for? Make sure you go and hit that subscribe button now. Craig really is one of my favourite true crime content creators, and I am so happy to be doing a collab with him this week. Everything about his videos, from the way that he presents the case to you, all the way to his backdrop, which I had to bring it up because it is so aesthetically pleasing. Can we take a minute for that backdrop, please? So make sure you are subscribed and you hit that notification bell because Craig puts up new videos every Sunday. Don't forget that Craig is over on my channel right now and he is telling you a super interesting case today that you do not want to miss, so make sure you go and check it out. Also, if you enjoyed my video today and you would like to see more of me, I would love if you would subscribe to my channel. I do videos just like this quite often and I would love to see you over there. There's going to be a link in the description box below for you to come over and check it out. So guys, thanks again for hanging out with me today, and thank you to the lovely Craig for letting me take over your channel. I hope you all have a great day, stay safe, and I will hopefully see you soon. Bye!